Portrait by Rachel White. Now, who is Rachel White? And why is she drawing me? And what am I doing when I'm reading? Remember this, at this point, came back from Mexico, a little bit more mellow. My folks are being good. My dad's being better to my mom. They're sorting out their issues. I think they had a little trial separation and tried to get divorced, and then started flirting on the internet, rekindled the romance, silly stuff, but they reconciled. My dad being epileptic is a little hard because he's really dependent on other people to drive for him. After he got in a couple accidents, he voluntarily gave up his license. So I think that's part of it, is he's a very independent type person psychologically, and he's taken medication which make him a little down. And then also like when I was in the Army, I was having dreams of going AWOL. And I was like, I guess it wasn't just the culture, and it wasn't just my chain of command, and it wasn't just like the school. Like, I didn't do good in high school. Why would I do good in Army school or language school? Because I was good at the other stuff, the PT and working with other soldiers. But it was also just the confinement that you can just pick up and go, that you had such a regimented, like, they owned your body, they owned your schedule. So I couldn't imagine with my dad. He loves driving. He's driven through the cliffs of Mexico. He's gone down there with my mom, visiting family when he used to drive. He was very independent for being epileptic. He played all sports in high school, basketball, football, I think baseball. He was, what else did my dad do? He worked in a bank in LA when he was meeting my mom, and then he worked at this pottery place, Pottery World in Glendale. And they would buy stuff wholesale and then sell it. He helped that guy manage his business. And there is this, I bring this up, just his character, because this is in the background of this picture of Rachel drawing this picture of me. I'm working at my folks' agency, and remember, their marriage is going through something. So who are these people? And I just went and visited my mom's family. I think maybe I visited my mom's family partially, if I'm thinking. This is how memories come out. You give them time, and you can always, there's only so much time in my life, so I could go deeper and deeper, but then I'll be living that life instead of this current life. So if I dwell on it a little bit, more and more stuff bubbles to the surface. And you might think that all the emotions are processed out of that time period, but there's these other subtle ones that seem to bubble up. So one that just came up is that I think that was a little bit of me siding with my mom in their disagreement. That although she could be a little heavy-handed in her language, and she's definitely a strong personality, I didn't think my dad was justified in how he was treating her. I was like, you don't treat a woman like that. He wasn't hitting her or anything, but just, I think, being a little disrespectful in his communication. And it was a little unseemly. I don't know, if an old dude wants to be with a young girl, who cares? Maybe I'm that type of guy where, like, when I get more status and money in my life, I'll just keep getting young girlfriends. I'm not going to judge and eventually be a hypocrite myself, but I definitely seem to have young energy and attract young people into my life. But the way he was going about it, I think, it's not to judge his actions, but the way he was going about it. Also, it was embarrassing because it was a con. It's like, you don't criticize someone for falling for a Nigerian prince scam because of their entrepreneurial skills or their business acumen. It's a scam. He fell for a scam, and that made me question his judgment. And I'm starting to realize why my parents exhibit poor judgment, reading these books on human behavior and psychology about authoritarian leaders and followers. I think they exhibit some traits of authoritarian followers, which that's, art I'm working on now in future art, but this is about my past. So my dad was in LA, and this is how noble or chivalrous he can be. She got her purse mugged. LA in the 70s, 80s, big cities in general were dangerous. This is like Batman big cities where you have superheroes, because like this is when like you had a lot of crime in the streets, purse snatchings. In New York, there's these gang of kids who would go around stabbing people with knives and screwdrivers. It was so scary in New York that there's this one guy who, these kids approached him in the subway, and he shot one of them, and then he fled into the subway tunnel, and then he turned himself in, and he was hailed a hero on the newspapers because he fought back. And in fact, turns out that the kids had screwdrivers on them, so they just, who knows if they did or didn't, weren't going to attack him, but that's how scared people were, that this guy who shot some kids who were approaching him, he felt that threatened. So my dad is working at his pottery thing. independent, even though he has epilepsy at that time, until he gave up his license, still very independent. And then this girl in front of his pottery place, so think of pottery, they probably have like a huge lot out front with all the huge planters, and then they have little stuff too, but they also have the big pottery. So it's like a Home Depot type place. This lady screaming like someone steals her purse. My dad runs after, like a superhero, turns the corner. The guy jumps into a car. My dad runs up to the car, and then someone's pointing a gun at him. He said like a 38 special or whatever that is. It's a small gun. So he points the gun at my dad from the car. My dad's like, you don't want to do that. And then when he says that, my dad jumps back, and he tells me, because that's another generation, my dad's generation, he tells me he was imagining like Audie Murphy. Audie Murphy is the most decorated soldier in the military. He was like a guy who won all the awards. When we were in basic training, there were Audie Murphy blurbs on your mess hall tables. So in basic training, you had like 5 minutes to eat, sometimes less. A couple times they really messed with us. There's a huge line to go get food, and as soon as the last person gets their food, they would tell us we have to go. And I think they'll give time for that last person to eat, but basically you just, as soon as you get your food, you sit down, you're just eating, because within a minute or two you might have to go. But sometimes when we have more time, you can read these little blurbs that were like a diner menu on a table. Well, we had like these menu cards, but they had stories about Audie Murphy, or stories about like military values, or like chain of command, or stuff we should be learning. But I remember the Audie Murphy ones, and like Audie Murphy did this or that. So my dad grew up in that generation where like he had a movie my dad watched when he was young. And my dad's dad fought in World War II, my grandpa, so as a Marine. He was like, I remember Audie Murphy, and like the guy, because he did these heroic feats of like taking on a whole enemy company by himself or something. So the guy has a gun at him. My dad chases the mugger to the car, runs up to the car, and then the driver pulls a gun on my dad. My dad's like, you don't want to do that. And the driver shoots him. But my dad jumps back at the same time, and the bullet apparently passes through, I don't know, somewhere around here. He says it's like being hit with like a baseball bat. And later on, the doctor's saying that when he does open heart surgery, that's where he does his incision. So it missed his heart, but it missed it by like maybe an inch or two. The doctor says that's about where I go in when I'm going in to work on the heart. So that's pretty close. And then it didn't hit any organs, didn't break any ribs, ricocheted off a rib without breaking it, and then passed out the back. And so the doctor actually took his utensil and put it through to make sure it was a clean hole. They did an x-ray, and he says that the x-rays were messed up, and he had to go and really make sure. And he went from one side to the other and pulled it out the back to make sure that there was nothing in there. My dad had a hole through him, so he had a hole shot through him. Just to talk about back then, the times of the day, my mom says that the doctor came from a party. So this on-call doctor, the 80s were a time of a lot of partying, a lot of coke and stuff, right? So like he was probably boozed up, probably a little coked up. My mom just remembers he was reeking a little bit of alcohol, but he was doing a good job, and he was trying to explain to them, oh, the x-rays are messed up, I'm gonna have to do this. And my dad had to be like, grit his teeth while he had this tool covered in iodine or whatever, sterilized, putting it through the hole to make sure that there were no obstructions, there was nothing going on, and there was no bullet in him. So he took a bullet for a random person trying to chase down her mugger. So he's a pretty noble dude. So I guess we have that in us, that type of, I don't know if that comes from the Irish side. My mom tells me that, you know, the men on my side of the family are worthless. That's why I married your dad, because your dad and his father are very strong men. But my mom claims that the women on her side of the family are good. I think that's like parent folklore too. You know, I know the males on my mom's side, and I don't think that they're worthless, but I do know that the males on my dad's side, and not just the males, but the Irish side is a little, there's something to that wild Irishman. Like, the more I learn about my aunts and my uncles, my uncle died a wild man in Costa Rica with a lot of, you know, what we can guess as like coke, like drugs and paid women around him. They were partying the night he died, but it was his choice. He sold his businesses up here. He went down there for his retirement, and he was that guy, that gringo in Latin America living it up. When I was in the Caribbean, when I was in Puerto Rico, we get those, the people who like, this is they want a place a little bit more wild than the U.S. The U.S. is a little bit more too stifling, and so these guys just go out somewhere where they can kind of like just live the life they want. And so you have your house, and you're able to like have your parties and splash your money, and you know, walk down to the beach, jump off waterfalls, swim in rivers, and be a little bit more, I guess, libertarian with your lifestyle. Libertine, be a libertine. And so that's one way, that's one retirement for men. Then that's kind of what I told my dad when he was acting up. I was like, well, if you want to be that way, but you won't be in the family if you're gonna, because my dad chose to have a family, and then with children, this is, I guess, we're talking about what it means to be a man, what it means to have a sense of ethics and morality to your tribe. It's like you can't have both. Like my uncle has failed marriage, not failed, we don't want to apply morality, but he's married and divorced multiple times, and his children, they're not, I don't think, their sense of identity is to not frame it in negative ways, their sense of identity is a reflection of the choices of the patriarch in that family, I guess. And that's what I was trying to tell my dad. Our sense of identity isn't going to be a reflection of your choices. As another male in this family, I'm going to make sure that we have some sort of core. So if you choose to wander, then I'm going to have to make sure that we hold this core together. And I think that's why I went to Mexico, to learn more about my mom. And I think I felt kind of like she was being disrespected, and it made me see her in a new light, and I wanted to know more about her story. So I come back, maybe a little bit more sensitive for that, trying to be a good man. And then I meet this girl, Rachel. I'm working in their office. I've shaved the mustache by now. That could only last a little bit. I already have crazy ideas in my head. It's harder to approach girls when I have the mustache. Although that's the first real relationship I had in my life, long term, like 5 years, I got with a mustache. But she told me when she met me, she thought I looked crazy, so I had to overcome the mustache. But that shows you that, you know, it's the connection, and everything else is just details. So it's okay if your details work against you. But Rachel, I remember when I met her, we were at the coffee shop. I was always reading, so I'm trying to do good by my folks, locking myself in a room in their office. They rented they had an office space for their insurance agency with separate rooms. So I closed the room, and when we argue too much, there's only so many times you could run away to Mexico. So I'm like, just leave me alone. I'm trying to make us money. We're learning how to set boundaries. And just like with women, when like you put all your emotions into a little connection, trying to turn it into true love, and then you push them away. That girl in the army where I called her and I was like, you know, you're not falling in love with me, so I think we have to not talk to each other anymore. It's a little immature. So my mom is like, just because we disagree, and just because you're still trying to, you know, I'm walking further away from Christianity, and she's still trying to pull me back, trying to hook me up. This is a Latin mom for you, Mexican mom, trying to hook me up with these, you know, friends of hers from the church. Oh, you know, so-and-so from the church, she's such a sweet girl, blah, blah, blah. And one of them is a good, one of the girls that she sent me to get my insurance license with, I did get a new license or renew an old one. I look back and I didn't realize how meddlesome she was being or trying to wingman me, but she made me drive with this one girl so we could both get our license together. But that girl was caught up on some other dude, and she was, me and her shared no interest, but she was beautiful, she was really pretty, and she has a couple of kids and a husband now. My mom brings her up, and I'm like, you know, she was actually, that was a really good one. That was if I was more aware of what was going on, I probably should have paid more attention to that one. But I'm at her office, working, trying to keep my peace with my folks. My folks are working out their thing, doing this like random drawing, random creating. But I've already created that amnesty, and I feel pretty good about that, so I have more swag and more confidence as a writer. It's like, all right, I could do this. Like, even if this thing, I don't know what I'm going to do with this project. I shelve it. I'm like, I don't know. I've run out of juice. I like where it's at. I don't want to mess it up. But then now I'm back in politics. So this book that I'm reading, when Rachel drew me, was probably politics. At this time, I was reading really heavily in politics. Not just, I've done the Iraq War, and I caught up on that, but now I'm trying to contextualize that with history. So I'm reading a lot of history. Michael Parenti, alternative history surveys to contextualize empire, and the CIA. What is the true, I read a book, one of the most influential ones, Conjuring Hitler, which is a economic history. So this guy just follows the money. So he says, all right, we hear Hitler's a bad guy, blah, 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 World War II, but how did he finance that army? How did, and people ask this online later on in a Reddit comment, I try to explain what I learned. You realize you don't get any traction if you don't fit in to the main narrative, and if you don't have an equally compelling narrative. We see this in politics all the time. The guy debating, two politicians debating, it's not so much the person who has the facts on their side focus, but who has a compelling narrative as well as the facts. Not even the facts, because Donald Trump has a really compelling narrative for his base, and he's probably the least factual politician. He is. If you look at, there's objective third parties who measure the honesty of politicians and how much they lie. PolitiFact. He is probably the most dishonest politician we've ever had. Yet his narrative holds strong. So I think that's because Donald Trump throws money at problems, and I think they bought really good data, so they've constructed their narrative. Their narrative is really tight because they really know who their base is, because we're in the age of data, and they went in like Cambridge Analytica or whatever that group is, and they just psychologically really understand their base and who they're going after, and so the narrative they've constructed is like propaganda on crack, like on steroids. It's like crack propaganda. We could coin a new phrase for it, crackaganda or something. It's very addictive. It stimulates all the right buttons, and then that's why I'm reading these books about authoritarians, leaders and their followers, to figure out where the levers are and where are the seams at which we can start peeling back the layers of this facade. So I'm starting to construct that now, and this is just like I looked at my life and I was like, all right, I want to stay athletic. I know I have a lot of catching up to do for romance because of my conservative Christian upbringing. Sales is always something good. God forbid something happens to my folks. I want to be able to step into their business, so put some money into that bank. This was like context of American empire. The war in Iraq was pissing me off so much. I want to get too emotionally heated. I see people around me who are emotional wrecks, and I don't want to be like that. I've always known that in sales and love and in life, my calmness has gotten me out of really tough situations, my level-headedness and ability to solve problems and be rational. So I'm trying to add more context to deal with these strong emotions now over the current war by tying it into the pattern of past wars. Rachel. I don't want to talk too much about Rachel because she has her own life. The only reason I put her name here is because I think she's a really good artist, and if she's still creating art, or she was doing some art shows, she was collecting other local artists together the last I talked to her a couple years ago. So she deserves credit for the painting or the sketch, but I would sit there at a coffee shop, and this was for a couple months, and I would just read. I would work at my parents' place, and then I would go to the YMCA in Redlands, work out, and then I would go and read for like 4 or 5 hours. 3 hours, like 2 to 4 hours. So usually by 5 or 6 I'd get over there, and then I'd stay there until like 10 if I could, reading books. And some books I would measure them by how many pages a minute I could read. So with like fiction, you should be able to read a page a minute. Speed readers are a little bit faster, but that's a good rule of thumb. When I'm reading out loud, when I was doing that Amnesty story, reading out loud is maybe like 2 pages a minute, maybe 4 pages, 2 to 4 pages a minute. The other way around. A couple minutes a page. So 2 minutes a page, 4 minutes a page. Some of these books I was reading, it was like, what was it? 20 minutes a page, 10 to 20 minutes a page. It was like at least 10 minutes a page. I'd only be getting 5 to 10 pages an hour. And so you just, after a couple hours, you figure out your pace and you're like, fuck, if this is the pace, commit to it, put your head down and soldier on. But when you're reading really heavy stuff, textbook type stuff, that is not only introducing new concepts that are challenging your cognitive dissonance, but then also it's just thick language. You can get through it, but you just have to slow down. You read it like paragraph at a time, but then you stop and you have to make sure you understood the paragraph. Then you read it again maybe, and then it's grinding. Some reading is grinding, but like you get a really great reward out of it. And then afterwards you want to like synthesize, you want to try to summarize it like by writing it yourself, just the main points, to make sure you're getting your comprehension. There's different levels of reading and different level concepts, and not all reading gives up comprehension at the same with the same ease. Some you really have to wrestle that comprehension out of the reading. So I'm learning that. This is the time when I was in Big Sur, and that guy was staring at the ocean with me, and he was bragging about how little books he read in order to actually get his PhD, and I was just looking at him like he was a piece of shit, because I saw his values of just getting by in life. This is when I was earning my personal PhD. I was like, all right, this is about how much reading. I think I read like 30, 40 books at that time. I've read a couple hundred over my lifetime. I've been trying to keep track of them now. I probably missed some, but I'm trying to grab the ones. Because now I don't have material possessions, I would like to get these books back and rebuild my library. I used to keep all the books. I used to have hundreds of books that I carried with me. When I went to Puerto Rico, I took a lot of books there. When I went to Mexico, I took some books, but I couldn't take them all. When I was in New York recently and I had my apartment, I had a couple hundred books in my apartment, which I gave up when I got evicted. That was my like cleansing, just to be like, all the stuff's in here, I have to now put it into a work. But I took all the titles so I could rebuild my library. So I'm deep into my self-education autodidact mode. But I also know I need to get laid. The proverbial get my dick wet. So Rachel, she looks cute. Just like when I was in Mexico, I have a little bit more swag, a little bit more confidence. I can put myself in situations I don't know how to close them. So I was able to get that girl's number at the gym and end up having some situations with her. Just wasn't able to actually seal the deal. Well, I mean, because you're not really trying to get laid. That happens, but that's a part of the process. You're trying to make a connection with the person. So using terms like that, like putting sex as the end goal, is going to sabotage you, just like putting money at the end goal of a service client professional relationship. So if you're all about the money, smart people see through that. You're never going to get good clients. You want to be about the service, and then you get the best clients, because the ones who want to pay someone, a professional, to solve a problem. And then when it comes to money, it's like, you already know I'm a professional. You don't negotiate with professionals. That's why you got me. You got me because I'm good at what I do. I can only be good at what I do if I'm well paid. And that's just inherent in the logic. So as long as within the first couple consultations, they know your price. If you keep working with each other, it's because you have an agreement that you're worth your price. Takes all the stress off the table. There's something similar with relationships, I think. I know you're not saving yourself for marriage. So we know what we're doing here. We're having an interaction, and there's an end, not an end, but there's a step in this interaction which is going to be physical, where it's going to become a physical interaction. And all we're doing is we're troubleshooting. We're seeing if you're the type of person who would want to get physical with me, and if I'm the type of person who would want to get physical with you. But this is so many other parts of this interaction that we're working on too. We're trying to string together good moments. And that's what I was starting to learn, how to, don't worry about the end result. Focus on that next action, string together some good moments. I smoke every now and then, not so much now because I learned how to smoke, drink, and play guitar in the Army. But you know, I know it's counterintuitive for my health, especially after 30. I think you shouldn't really be. Someone told me people who smoke don't like themselves, so I think it's a little bit of sign of low self-esteem. Back then, I'm still working on who I am and how much I like myself. So that's probably the insecurity. I'm still smoking, something to do. Nowadays, I smoke joints like crazy. I think it's, if you're gonna smoke a cigarette, smoke a joint. I don't even need that many cigarettes anyways. So a joint in the morning, a joint in the evening replaces a cigarette morning, evening. And I think the weed, for the tar it gives you, it sort of balances it out by being an expectorant that brings stuff out of your lungs. So I think weed is healthier than tobacco, in my opinion. I think the medical science is still figuring it out. So she's smoking outside this coffee shop that I'm always at, always reading. I go out, bum a cigarette from her. Really easy way to start a conversation. Notice she has some burns on her wrist, and I'm like, do you make pizzas? Or do you work in a pizza oven? Because I used to deliver pizzas, and when you're reaching into the oven, you burn yourself on your wrist. I just noticed when we used to work with each other, we would have these burns. People who worked with ovens. And she was like, no, that was from camping. But just, that's not, like, I guess that's the Sherlock Holmes approach of hitting on someone, pointing out things that you notice. But it's sincerity. I'm just starting a conversation. We both smoke. So now I know this is a kind person. If she didn't want to talk to me, you can get that nonverbal cues really help you figure out what's going on. and you need practice in order to pick up on those things. So the way someone gives you a cigarette when you bum it kind of lets you know if the door's open for a conversation. And even if it's not, you can try one or two more, but like then you pretty much you give up. But it seemed like she wouldn't mind the company or the talking, and now I have an 8-minute cigarette about to talk to her and figure out if I can get that next door. And then you have to have an exit strategy. Like you want to try to get the number at the end or something, right? But you just have to fill up between now introduce myself and now at the end get a number. And so I'm like, oh yeah, anything, talk about anything, but to allow your personality to come out, and also remember you want to get their personality. If you're just trying to impress her, you don't even know if you like this person. That's another thing about confidence. Just trying to get everything you see. It's like they called my friend in Mexico this, and it's opening my eyes. In Mexico, I got a little bit of experience hanging around other guys who would like make fun of guys who approach women wrong. And they called this guy pie planado, flatfoot. And I was like, why do you call him flatfoot? And they're like, because he steps on everything. Because your foot has an arch. So when you step, your foot has parts of your foot that aren't touching the ground. But a flat foot steps and his foot touches the ground with every part of his foot. Just colorful language. That's this guy, every single woman he tries to hit on, it's like you don't even know if they're your type. Like there's so many women in the world. There's this old saying, 2 bulls are on a hill looking down at a pasture full of cows, and there's an old bull and the young bull, and the young bull tells the old bull, oh my gosh, look at all these cows, let's go fuck them all, let's go run down there and fuck them all. And the old bull says, let's walk down there and fuck them one at a time. Like take things one at a time. You can't, there's only so many women. There's no, other than if you're pursuing women in order to boost up numbers and make yourself look better for your friends, you're missing the point. You're not appreciating quality over quantity. In life, all of the pleasures are quality over quantity. A lack of experience makes you want quantity over quality because you learn from the quantity, you learn from experience. But once you start to get like journeyman's experience in romance and sales and other things, then like as I get older in the gym, I just went back recently, so I'm doing these artistic projects, feeling a little sedentary. Also my poverty run recently, I was in the 180s and I've dropped down to the 160s. I just weighed myself today and I'm like low 170s with my clothes on, so probably high 160s. But my mom's been feeding me like crazy over here, so I was skin and bones. My face still looks really sallow. I have the beard that puffs it up a little bit, but you could see as I'm getting older, my skin hangs on my meat sacks hanging on my bones. So yeah, I'm definitely technique. Like when I was working out earlier this morning, I don't want to get hurt because that puts you back, 2 weeks, 4 weeks. I already have a hairline fracture, which I'm nursing on my wrist when I fell off my bike earlier this year. And it didn't heal within, it's still really tender, and it's been like 2 months now, so that's probably not a bruise, that's probably like, so I have to be a little bit careful with that. So yeah, when you're working out, you just, you don't want to push yourself, but technique is more important, I find, in physical stuff when you're older versus just brute force. When you're younger, you're a little bit more elastic. So I'm learning that, and Rachel was a really good experience. We had a good conversation. She said no, it was camping. Through the conversation, I learned she was just out of a relationship, and the guy sounded like a bit of a dick. And I started to learn like these indicators of when someone's on or off the market, because that's another thing. It's like in sales, I got a lot of success in real estate when I started qualifying a lot better. So I have the initial phone call, and I'll talk to them for 5 or 10 minutes. But on the phone call, I'll get the agreements that I'm going to be your broker and no one else, and you're going to pay me a fee. If I don't get those agreements, you don't even go into my sales campaign. And even from then, after I get those agreements and we start a process, I'm only going to still close like maybe 10 to 20% of those. But I won't get those agreements for a majority of the people I talk to. So you don't even get into the sales pipeline until I know you're my type of person, because otherwise it's just going to be a pain in the ass. So when I would do sales, I would reflect upon my romantic life. And when I would do romance, I'm in the office making 200. At that time, we were trying to open up new markets. My parents had just got some good markets for commercial trucking. And down the 10 freeway out of uh, Los Angeles going into the Inland Empire. They call that the shipping corridor. 30% of all goods in the United States come through that corridor. The Long Beach, the Port of Long Beach, is the busiest port in the United States, I think. And so there's a whole lot of goods coming from China into the Southern California ports and shipping all over the country. And my dad was driving down the freeway with someone one day, and he just saw a truck, and he cold called them. He just saw the number on the back, and we actually got that business. So we got the idea, you know, there's all these trucks around. My parents had personal insurance, homeowners, auto, and then we were like, you know what, fuck the small stuff, let's start making some real money. So I was helping them do that. And I knew the logic of sales, the logic of life, it's the same patterns everywhere. It's like, well, fuck, I was starting to learn how to build lead databases. I got all the motor carrier numbers in California. You have to be licensed with these certain numbers in order to be regulated by the state to be a truck or a trucking company. And every single truck or every single company has a certain number, two identifying numbers with the state of California. I found out where they were online, found the whole list. So now I have my tens of thousands of database, and I was turning that list into my couple thousand of qualified leads. And they're qualified because I got a contact person and an expiration date when their insurance was coming up. So I was taking my tens of thousands raw numbers, and I was learning about a sales campaign. That what you do is, raw data is great, but you need these processing steps to filter data. And later on when I started looking into data, which really interests me, data and how you deal with it, with the internet, how you deal with overwhelming information in a way that you can turn overwhelming raw information into useful information. Is you have to process, you have to put it through systems, and you can invent it yourself, whatever you can think of. So when we think about the internet and the early movers, and Elon Musk, and Jeff Bezos and people, are they asking the right questions? Because they could have all the money in the world, and they could have all the technology in the world and the early movers, and we could be like, oh man, it sucks because it's too bad we're not them. You are them. Because you have more resources than they had when they started, probably raw with nothing. You have a more developed internet, and also you have them as examples. So if you can ask better questions than they're asking, and if you can figure out a different path to similar goals that they're getting to, you might actually be able to beat them to that goal. So I've never, but that might be back to my underdog mentality. I've never felt like someone's better than me, no matter what resources they have. So back then I'm like, oh yeah, let's open up a new market. Let's get into trucking. So knowing nothing about it, I'm cold calling these guys because I'm not even really trying to sell them. If I sell them, great. And one guy I cold called, and I got a $20,000, $30,000 account. But that one was out of the phone book. So that wasn't verified data at all, the phone book. But I was like, it's like, I know there's a deal in there somewhere. Look around you. I know there's money out here. Money is just hanging from the trees. I just have to reach up and grab it. But that means that every time you're on the phone, you have to keep that positive attitude. You have a mirror in front of you. Most communication is nonverbal in person. It's like 70% of your communication is nonverbal. I don't care too much about how I come off because this is more like a diary. But you want to be smiling in person, and you want to be smiling on the phone. Because just because you're on the phone doesn't mean that your communication is still not nonverbal. It's in your tone, the pauses, how you're carrying. So I would keep a mirror in front of me, not to be fake, but to make sure I'm enjoying myself, I'm smiling, I'm relaxed. So I was like, calling over 200 calls. That was my goal, over 200 calls a day, because I had to get through these tens of thousands of raw numbers, and then I eventually had thousands of point people and expiration dates, because then I could filter those by month. And then I started to have, like, October's coming up. Well, I have like 500, 700 people who are renewing their insurance in the month of October, and I started to learn that I had to call them 2 months in advance. So I call them 60 days in advance, and I had the controller or the person who purchased the insurance and what type of policies they had, how big's the company, as much information as you could get from that initial call. I was my own prepper, and then I had to be my own closer too. I was bad at that. Until I got to insurance, I didn't really close real business. But all of that experience, even though I didn't really make money with my folks, I just made enough to justify my existence, a couple small deals here and there for my coffee money, my workout money. I think I had a car. But all of that held me in real estate, where I was like, all right, time to fucking get over the hump. I know how to do a sales campaign. I know how to do a sales pipeline. I know how to do these tons of brute force calls. Time to learn that other side, that closing side, that took a little desperation, that took a little bit more commitment. I mean, what I did, I put all of the art to the side, and I said, let me just focus on this when I turn 30. It was like, this is make or break. I'm going to be a real estate agent, and I pulled it out, and I made over 100,000 a year. But Rachel White. So I'm learning that in romance. I'm learning how to qualify better. And from our first conversation, I learned that she moved from LA, leaving a bad relationship. That's a very well qualified romantic lead. I mean, you know, when people are on the rebound, sometimes it's not a good time. But also, he turned out to be like an Arabic guy or Persian or something. Those girls I was starting to learn liked me. I kind of look Arabic, so you start to learn. I've since broadened. I'm an omnivore, so I feel like I have the ability to get with people who say I'm not their type. But back then, definitely, if someone, it seems like I am their type, what is a type? But something you're familiar with. I kind of look like your ex-boyfriend. That's probably going to give me an edge, unless well, it depends on how much you look like him. If I reminded her of a terrible person. But I mean, he sounded like he was a dick, but anyways, it's like, there was a vibe there. There's a vibe with me and her. She was an artist, obviously. She painted this. So I'm talking about my artwork. I'm talking about my short story I made. I always vibe with artists, the creation process, generalizing it out. And I was there reading, and then also I have something to put my energy into. So I'm not just trying to grow this romance. I'm still, that's why she drew this picture of me. What are you doing today? Doing the thing I do every day, working with my folks, and then I'm going to the coffee shop and I'm reading 4 hours. Oh, do you mind if I come and I could draw while you read? Awesome, now we're co-creating. I'm creating my art, even though I'm not even creating art. Yeah, I'm just researching, but I know this is going to go into something, which all these poems afterwards it did. And now she's co-creating, she's drawing me. So I knew, I'm like, damn, well, this is how you create a relationship. We both have something. We're not looking at each other, we're looking in the same direction. As co-creators, we're both creative. I earned some of my childhood back, my youth, not having girlfriends in high school. I took her to like Olive Garden. I did shit that like, what do you do with a girl? I don't know. So you got to start somewhere. So like, I didn't go to like prom and homecoming and stuff. So she was the girl that like I had a couple like corny dates with. We went to the bar for Halloween. We didn't have any real costumes. I think she was a battered housewife. It was probably poor taste. But that's another thing. We were just like goofy, you know, not easily offended. Yeah, and I checked in with her. But my life, living a couple months here or there, I left, came back. We didn't really have much. I mean, if I'd stayed, we probably would have seriously dated, and it would have been a really nice relationship. Some people you meet in your life, you're like, why didn't it work out? It was no fault of hers, because she was a really good person, and everything I learned about her was awesome. I met her family, and but I was still figuring out who I am, and I guess there wasn't enough there to make me stay. So it's one of those things where it's like, man, I should have treated Rachel better. I just leave. I'm like, all right, I'm going to Northern California. Time for me to visit my Santa Cruz people. Don't think I really said goodbye to her properly. It was always in and out. Oh, now I'm out of town. All right, I'll catch you next time I'm in town. And then a couple years later, I ran into her, and I think we like reconnected. We had a little fling, but then and then the next time I reconnected, a couple years after that, she was dating someone else, and it seemed kind of serious. So she's probably married now. I mean, in your 30s, that's what happens. Like, this is like 10 years ago, so. But she was like putting on art shows, and she was doing cool shit. So hopefully she's still doing cool shit. She was definitely like a formative experience. That was like my first normal, like it wasn't a dating long-term, multiple years, but we had dates, and it was a pickup at a coffee shop, an immediate vibe, a little bit of co-creation. We shared values. It was like, that's what it is. It's like the first ones when you're younger, like, I'm just horny, I'm trying to just stick my dick into something, I'm just trying to like get experience. Well, luckily I lost my virginity to the girl that like I was like my like junior high sweetheart, like, so that was really romantic, and we'll always have a place in our hearts because of that. That's why we still keep in contact, because we saw each other at that one stage, and then we shared. Hopefully that's why she keeps in contact with me. Or hopefully there's still some of that person that we see in each other now. But Rachel was that first adult, like, you're a stranger, I'm a stranger, but there's something about you. And then after conversation, all right, this is growing, and then it grew. But I was chasing something, and it was very, very hard for me to describe, and it was very hard for me to sit down and commit. Also, when you meet someone like that, you're like, well, shit, this is you get scared of commitment, because you're like, I'm. But when girls say, oh, this guy's scared of commitment, it's kind of selling like someone like me short, because it's not the commitment, it's my ambition. Is that if I sit down and do this, I know I need other experiences in my life. After this, I did a lot of other stuff. One of them was going to New York. I needed that experience. When I read about the Imperial Centers, like consciously, I didn't really think I was going to New York to really go to the heart of like this American empire. But now I can say that I learned a lot by doing that, and I can reflect on all that. I just knew I needed to go to a bigger pond. Big fish in a small pond type thing. In order for me to flower and develop, I needed a bigger setting, more people, more opportunity. I think she did too. That's why she went to LA. And I had nothing but positivity. And yeah, this is such a good time capsule of that moment. It still makes me smile. That cigarette and that conversation and all the lives that we could have lived if we had more than one, right? But that's what makes it so beautiful.